The story begins quietly, the way most meaningful moments do, without announcement, without music swelling in the background, without anyone realizing that a decision made in an ordinary hour might linger in memory for years. It was a weekday morning, not especially early and not yet late, the kind of time when cities are already awake but still undecided about what kind of day they're going to be. Daniel Mercer stood in his kitchen holding a mug he'd reheated twice and still forgotten to drink. His apartment was modest, not in a dramatic way, just practical. A small table near the window, a stack of folded laundry on one chair, his daughter's backpack leaning against the wall like it had been placed there with intention, even though it never was. He wasn't rushed, exactly, but there was pressure in the room, the quiet kind that comes from knowing the clock is moving whether you acknowledge it or not. In 2 hours, Daniel had an interview, one he'd been preparing for carefully, responsibly, without the fantasy that it would change everything overnight. It was simply a step. A better schedule. Slightly better pay. A role that asked a bit more of him and, in return, offered stability he could plan around. He had printed the job description and read it enough times to stop seeing the words and start seeing himself inside them. Daniel was a single father, though he rarely used the phrase out loud. Not because it felt heavy, but because it felt unnecessary. It explained too much too quickly. He preferred to let his routine speak instead. Breakfasts packed the night before. Calendar reminders that included parent-teacher meetings right alongside work deadlines. A sense of responsibility that wasn't dramatic or exhausting, just constant. His daughter, Emma, was 9, old enough to notice things and young enough to accept them without commentary. She understood that some mornings were quiet and focused, that some evenings were tired, and that neither meant something was wrong. That morning, she had already left for school with a neighbor, waving without stopping, trusting that her father was exactly where he needed to be. Daniel liked that trust. It kept him honest. The interview wasn't for a dream job. That mattered to him. He had stopped chasing dreams in the abstract a few years earlier, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Dreams, he'd learned, could be loud and vague. He preferred plans. This interview was for a project coordination role at a mid-sized logistics firm, unremarkable on the surface, but structured, steady, and close enough to home that he wouldn't have to calculate traffic with anxiety every morning. He had done the preparation the way he did most things, thoroughly, without drama. He knew the company's recent contracts, the names of the interviewers, the challenges mentioned in their last quarterly report. He also knew the limits of his control. He could show up prepared, speak honestly, and leave the rest where it belonged. When he stepped outside, the air was cooler than expected. The kind of cool that suggests change without insisting on it. He walked toward the bus stop with a measured pace, not rehearsing answers in his head anymore, but thinking instead about the questions he might ask them. Over time, Daniel had learned that interviews weren't performances, they were conversations with consequences. The street was busy in a muted way, cars moving without urgency, people walking with headphones in, small scenes overlapping and dissolving before anyone could hold on to them. It was at the corner, just before the crosswalk, that he noticed the woman. She wasn't dramatic either. No collapse. No cry for help. Just someone standing very still, one hand gripping the strap of her bag a little too tightly, the other resting against a lamppost as if it were the only solid thing in the world at that moment. Daniel might have walked past. That's important to say. He wasn't a hero type, and this wasn't a moment charged with moral clarity. He noticed her because she seemed slightly out of sync with the movement around her. Everyone else was crossing when the light changed, she wasn't. Her eyes were focused somewhere just below eye level, unfocused but alert, like she was trying to remember something urgent and failing. Daniel slowed, not because he'd made a decision yet, but because his attention had caught. He asked a simple question, nothing rehearsed, nothing noble. "Are you okay?" It was the kind of question people ask every day without expecting an answer. This time, there was one that she looked up, surprised, as if the city had just spoken directly to her. She said she felt lightheaded. That she might need a moment. Her voice was steady, which made the words feel more concerning, not less. Daniel glanced at the bus schedule posted nearby. He had time, technically. Enough time to help briefly and still make his interview, if everything stayed simple. He offered to sit with her on the bench a few steps away. She agreed, hesitating only for a second, like someone who wasn't used to accepting help but knew when not to refuse it. As they sat, Daniel kept his posture neutral. He didn't crowd her. He didn't flood the moment with questions. He had learned, through parenting and through life, that calm was often the most useful thing you could offer someone. She explained that she'd been traveling since early morning, meetings stacked too tightly, meals skipped without intention. It wasn't a crisis. It was accumulation. Daniel nodded, understanding more than he needed to explain. He offered her water from his bag, the same bottle he carried for Emma, refilled every morning. She took it with a small, genuine thank you. Time passed in uneven pieces. A few minutes that felt like seconds, then a stretch that seemed longer than it was. Daniel checked his watch once, then deliberately didn't check it again. The interview was now becoming something he might be late for, depending on how things unfolded. The woman's color improved slowly. She breathed more evenly. She apologized for the inconvenience, using the word as if it were currency she could pay him with. Daniel shrugged it off, saying something unmemorable but sincere. He wasn't thinking about morality or consequences. He was thinking about what kind of example he would describe later. If Emma asked how his day went, when the bus arrived, Daniel realized that if he got on now, he would leave her alone before she was fully steady. There were other people around, of course, but the choice still felt specific. He hesitated, standing up, then sitting back down. He sent a brief message to the interviewer explaining that he might be slightly delayed due to an unexpected situation. No explanation beyond that. He had learned that over-justifying rarely helped. The woman noticed the movement, the phone, the pause. She told him he should go. That she would be fine. Daniel believed her, mostly. He also stayed. Not out of sacrifice, but out of alignment with something quieter than urgency. They talked lightly while they waited, about nothing important and nothing strategic. She mentioned work, vaguely. He mentioned his daughter, specifically. The conversation didn't build toward anything. It simply existed. When she finally stood up, steadier now, she thanked him again and said something that stayed with him: "You didn't make this into a big thing." That helped. Daniel nodded, unsure how to respond, and watched as she walked away, merging back into the city without spectacle. Only then did he stand, aware that the interview was no longer on schedule, aware that the day had already changed shape. This is where many stories would rush forward, would hint loudly at what the moment meant or what it would become. This one doesn't. At least not yet. For now, there was just a man standing at a bus stop, holding an empty water bottle, recalculating his route, and accepting, without resentment, that responsibility sometimes asks for flexibility, and that not every choice announces its importance when you make it.